Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci d'être avec nous en ce début d'après-midi. Je suis Anne-Claire Duprat, je dirige la Fondation d'entreprise Martell, basée à Cognac. Et on est ravis de vous recevoir pour cette conversation qu'on organise avec Mathilde Pellé, Arne Hendriks et Ernesto Oroza. Je ne vais pas être longue parce que c'est la conversation qui nous intéresse. C'était juste vous expliquer très rapidement pourquoi on a souhaité créer cette table ronde. Il se trouve que la Fondation Martell, donc basée à Cognac, en 2 mots, organise des expositions et accueille des artistes, des designers et des créateurs en résidence. Et Mathilde Pellé présente actuellement une exposition à la Fondation jusqu'au 29 décembre, qui a ouvert début juin, où elle déploie son travail autour de maisons soustraires et elle a poursuivi la recherche à la Fondation autour de la question de la soustraction. Et en discutant avec Mathilde, on s'est rendu compte qu'il y avait une discussion qu'elle souhaitait engager avec Arne et Ernesto autour de ces sujets. Donc on trouvait ça intéressant de le partager avec le public et notamment à Paris pendant Paris Design Week, sachant que la Fondation d'entreprise est aussi mécène de France Design Week. Donc pour nous, ça faisait vraiment sens. Voilà, donc c'est vous inviter à venir découvrir ce projet si vous êtes de passage dans le Sud-Ouest. Et puis, eh bien, lancer la discussion tout de suite. Merci.
Merci Anne-Claire. Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. Welcome to this round table. I'm very happy to be talking with Arne and Ernesto today. As artists, designer and researcher, all 3 of us are involved in studies, reflection and experiments on the notion of less. I'm going to start by briefly introducing my subtractive approach and explain how I came to meet Arne and Ernesto. Then you can both present your own working methods and approaches, and I'll invite you to comment on various images afterwards. The idea is to offer an open conversation about your point of views and to consider how the less material can be a profound potential for studying and transforming our ways of life. And we will certainly have some time at the end for a few questions. So I'm starting with my research project Soustraire, to subtract or to remove. As a designer in 2016, I experienced what I call a design crisis. I was afraid that all I was doing was adding new material, new objects, and new needs in a world that was calling for moderation. Without failing into a radical opposition, I chose to take an interest in less and its potential. And gradually this became a research approach that gave rise to various experiments and projects. One of these experiments took place in 2018 at the CID Grand Ornu in Belgium as part of an exhibition named Limits to Growth, in reference to the 1972 Meadows report. So the project was called Une pénurie, a shortage. One of the exhibition space was set up as a bourgeois domestic setting, and I claimed that in response to a material crisis, the state was taxing every home with 9 kilos of material per day. So over 11 days, I gradually removed material from the various objects in this installation. This project was like a fable without moral, faking a future in which ideas of comfort and the image of objects were completely challenged by the decline of material resources. So Arne's incredible Shrinking Man project was on show at this exhibition. And this image was the first contact I had with his work. To get to the space where I was working, I crossed Arne's space, and there was this impression at the top of a staircase. I don't know if you remember. Okay. So we were working on site for a few days at the same time, which gave us the opportunity to discuss the notion of less and also that of more. And it was on this occasion that I told you, Arne, the story of my mother's unintentional collection. She had 2 little ceramic chickens in her kitchen, and one day someone gave her a 3rd one, which led to many gifts afterwards. And just like that, and because she's too polite to put a limit on this non-choice, lots of chicken invade the kitchen. You made me this sincere proposal that I take your image back with me at the end of the exhibition, so it could be included into this collection. So I declined, perhaps because I was afraid that my mother would become smaller than the chickens or that they would grow too big around her. But maybe this image of the chicken with the man could have put an end to this growing collection. To this day, I'm still not quite sure what to do about the overgrowth. So that's how we met with Arne. And now Ernesto, so when I was a student, I was working on a specific project and had come to the conclusion that there were no possible designed objects in response to the problem I had posed. And my teacher, Olivier Pericot, suggests that I read Rick and Billy Ernesto book. So it was my first contact with Ernesto's work, which I think, looking back on it now, completely opened up the designer's field of action for me. Then when I started working with the Deep Design Lab at the Cité du Design in Saint-Étienne in 2020, I met you there, Ernesto. You'd taken over as a director of the magazine Azimut. And the three of us could have met at that point because Arne was supposed to come for a starvation experiment in Saint-Étienne. But the COVID came, and that's when we realized that you had both already written to each other about 15 years ago, and we thought it would be a good idea to organize an event together. So we tried several times in the past few years, but it's happening now today. Thanks to Anne-Claire Duprat, director of the Martell Fondation, who was enthusiastic about the idea of this meeting. So back in Saint-Étienne in 2020, with the Deep Design Lab and with the support of the École Urbaine de Lyon, I carried out the Maison&Objet project. So in 8 weeks, I removed 2/3 of the material from the 112 objects that makes up my living space, a flat that was set up for the occasion. And this led me to dissect the object present one by one and to question the way of life that was built around them. And I inhabited the various successive material realities of this domestic environment. It was an experience of both reduction and radical recomposition, allowing to reconsider which object and how much matter enter our homes and why. In transforming the object, I was interested in their material, their origins, and their form, their presence, and their impact, how these new shapes impacted my behavior, gesture, and habits. So at the end of that project, I had to package all the objects, data and leftover produce. This means removing the cast iron bathtub from the flat, and the bathtub was originally there in the flat. So it's a very heavy item and sharp, and Ernesto kindly helped me down 3 flights of stairs with it. And without getting hurt, we end up loading it into my car. We talk about the storage of our project-related production, which can take up a lot of space. And you say something like that, the crochet textile technique is really interesting because technically it's interesting and it's also light and flexible. So there's less trouble to manage the product after working with it. So I always think about that when I look at the bath now, and it helps me to better consider what type of material to use in future projects. So thank you both for this generous meeting, and thank you for being here today. And Ernesto, then Arne, if you'd like to introduce your approach and work.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here today because this conversation with you and the possibility to meet him. We was talking for maybe 20 years. We talked 20 years ago, maybe more, the first time, and it's great to meet you here and to talk later. Then I'm a Cuban designer and a researcher, an artist, and other things, I guess. And I'm teaching now in the School of Design in Saint-Étienne. I'm living in France from 4 years now, 3 or 4 years now. And I arrived there to, as Mathilde said, to work in the Azimut, the journal, and Cidre. And I have a good friend here working with me in this journal, like Victoria and Thibault. And thank you for coming. And Then I finished the School of Design in Cuba when my country was really going deep in economic crisis because Soviet Union disappeared. Then all not my education, because I was educated to be a kind of German designer in the Caribbean, because the School of Design in Cuba was using the program of Germany. But when I finished the school, my country was in crisis, and this changed totally my practice forever. Then I will present to you 3 of the subjects that I'm working today, now still, and the first one is the logic of the standard object has a vector. When people are living in scarcity and people have only a few of objects, in Cuba we have that. Everybody during the 90s has one kind of TV, one kind of fan, 2 kind of refrigerator, 1 kind of washing machine. Everybody has the same bottles, the same artifacts, the same everything. When somebody learns how to use one object, everybody learns with them. Then this is an example of this jar that I found in Cuba. I found this object in 2 different places of the country. One time was in Havana, the second one was in Santiago de Cuba. And both persons arrived to the same solution because there is not too much. Then when you are living in scarcity, everybody will arrive to the same solution with the raw material. And this is the first example. The second one, and I'm still working about that. I'm working about the vector. The object has a vector to transmit local ideas. The second example that I brought today was people in Cuba already today don't want to repair anymore. They are tired to repairing for 20, 30 years. Now they are thinking about prophylaxis. They are correcting the chair before the chair is broken. Everybody knows monoblock will be broken everywhere, in India, in Africa, in Caribbean, everywhere, in France. And people in Cuba, when the cost of the chair in Cuba is now maybe 4 times the salary. Imagine what happened with a chair, that the cost of the chair is your salary 4 times. Then they are buying the chair and they are correcting the problems of the chair to avoid the chair is broken. And this is the third image that I propose is this notion of the placeholder. This is a park in the National Zoo of Havana, and the government don't have money to repair the park, and the government is giving to the people found solution to repair the park for the kids, and somebody have this idea to put this object and to remove the object every day. They just put it every day in the morning and they remove the elements every day. And this represents something that I'm working already now too, is the notion of the placeholder. The placeholder is in graphic design an object that occupied many years ago. The old graphic designer will remember that. When you are doing a book, for example, you send to the print shop a page with a black square in the position where the photo will be. Then you send a black square to put in the place when the photo will be there. And this is okay, the time? Yeah. When you have the placeholder, it's a kind of object occupating for the moment, provisoirement, the object that is not there anymore. Then, every object made by Cubans in the last 30 years are placeholder. We are creating something to replace something that we don't have. We are doing Rickenbillies. Rickenbilly is a bike with an engine. We are doing that because we don't have public transportation. Or we are doing, for example, inventing different things because we don't have the original object. We are keeping the hope to have the original object, but we don't have it. Then we create placeholder. Then for me, these artifacts represent this placeholder. These artifacts is occupating the position of the park in the moment. But the most important thing for me is which kind of question this object, this placeholder are doing to us as a designer, as an artist today, about who needs to produce, who deciding what we need, who is taking the control of the thing that we are producing today. Then this is the 3 axes of my research today. The standard has a vector, the prophylactic approach to the repair, and the placeholder notion to questioning our reality, our practice as a designer. And I think I finished. Just 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto.
So the first image was, of course, about a project that's been going on for 15 years. It's The Incredible Shrinking Man, where I use my body as a sort of, not a placeholder, but it represents a, let's say, ideology. I'm a typical Dutch guy, I'm like 2 meters tall. There's a lot of excess, let's say. There's a lot of unnecessary flesh, and that flesh needs to be fed, needs to be housed somewhere. It has a lot of repercussions, let's say that. And then somehow we see this very tall body as a quality in itself. So we normally say when people are very tall that they must be living in great conditions, and you know, they have a lot of food, all this kind of, which is to some extent, yes, the body is the result of certain conditions, but the large body itself is not necessarily a good outcome. So that is a cause and effect confusion that is going on. So the Incredible Shrinking Man investigates if we can become smaller, if we can culturally and biologically create the desire to become smaller. Because as we know, we're all much more about growth, about more, about things that move in an upward direction. It's very deeply ingrained in us, so deeply that you can say that our culture is preconditioned to put all the creative force, all the creative energy, all our money, all our resources, all our schooling, all our economics in this one direction, which means that we are only developing half of the story, of course, because in cycles, there's always also a decline and less and shrinkage. And what I'm trying to do in my own work, for myself personally, and of course for others, for the public, is to develop the culture that is ignored. A culture that can be about beauty as well. That is about less, but that can be about a lot of things. But we're not looking there because we're preconditioned. We can go to the... I came to, and of course there's so many things, but this image refers to a memory that I have of first coming to Okinawa in Japan, where at the beginning of a meal people say hara hachibu. And I didn't understand what that meant, so I tried to say, I don't speak Japanese, can you explain to me? And I have to put the mic down, or you can hold maybe. I'll just show you how she explained to me what hara hachibu means. She sort of stuck out her left arm, and with the fingers of her right hand she took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finger steps forward, and then some very expressively she took that last step back. And she picked up that invisible step between her thumb and her finger, and she presented it to me. And I could of course see that there was nothing there. In my mind there was nothing there, but still, because I was playing along, I stuck out my hand, and with a lot of sort of joy, she pushed that invisible 5th step in my hand, and then she said again, hara hachibu, and later on I found out that it simply means eat until you're 80% full. So don't eat until you're completely full, eat until you're 80% full. Because I had gone to Okinawa, because people there are very small, but it's also one of the most famous blue zones, so people become very old as well. And I thought that was such an interesting mix, because we don't desire smallness, but we do desire long life. And somehow in Okinawa they had somehow put these things together, something that we really do not want and something that we do want. And I thought I had to go there. And so she explained what... I can hold it again, sorry, thanks. So in this one gesture, she somehow explained the foundation of what she believed to be the power of the Okinawan culture, which is we don't fill up everything, we always keep space. And in that space, we are presented with good health, we are presented with a sort of nicer social life. In Okinawa also, the older generation feels much happier somehow. They consider themselves to be very happy, and they always put that on the philosophy of hara hachibu, 80%. Maybe we can go to the next image. And that made me think of dinosaurs, which of course became very, very big. And the interesting thing about becoming very, very big, like our economy or like, you know, all the things that we are sort of involved with in our cultures, is that it's very, very difficult to become bigger than you've ever been. Because you basically have to reinvent reality to become even a little bit bigger. So a lot of innovative power goes into being bigger. But the problem with that power is that it's only involved in being bigger. It doesn't do anything special. It just makes things that are already existing just a little bit bigger, like with the body in a way. Now the interesting thing, of course, with dinosaurs is as they became smaller, at some point in their lives they became able to fly because of the innovations that had occurred when they were very big. Because to be so big, you need very light bones, you need very strong heart, you need lungs that take a lot of oxygen out of the blood, otherwise you cannot go to the extremities of the body. So somehow birds would never have existed without dinosaurs being so big, which I find very interesting. So somehow in that space that was created in becoming smaller, something, I don't know, magical happened, you can say, and the transformation into birds took place. So something very big and bothersome maybe has a purpose, but only if it becomes smaller afterwards. So that for me is an interesting metaphor about, let's say, our economic reality. What are the transformative powers that are in our knowledge already today, that when we start to make a step back, like that lady did in Okinawa, what transformations are possible that we are now so afraid of? Because we believe in the idea of always more and bigger. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, and then there's one project I'm working on. Maybe you heard the story. The consequences of becoming taller all the time are very nicely sort of presented by this Eames chair that in 2009 was made bigger because they weren't selling the chair anymore. Now this is an 8,000 euro chair. They weren't selling the chair because customers had become so tall that this chair from 1956 was not comfortable anymore. Now, Eames, of course, it's all about comfort. Comfort in itself, a very interesting theme that we can discuss, I think. To make a chair that is a three-dimensional object, maybe 10% bigger, you need, in 3 dimensions, 10% more material. So to make that one chair bigger, you need 33% more materials. And of course, that's very bad design. You can love this design, but it's very bad design. Even somehow the dimensions changed as well, which is kind of another interesting question that you can ask about design classics. Can you just change dimensions? Is it still the same design, or has it completely changed? I mean, how big do you want to make this chair, right? 10 by 10 meters? Is it still a lounge chair by Eames? These are questions that are sort of intellectual ones, but the material questions are more concerning to me, that we need more. And so we bought these chairs. Yeah, I can just to finish off. So we bought the chair on the left and the right, so both of them, and we started sort of saving the big one and tried to reduce it back to a classic chair. So I've been working on that project for the last years, cutting into the flesh of the chair. I was just explaining to Mathilde that it took me 9 months even to dare do it because it's expensive and somehow money always makes you afraid to do something, right? So that very expensive chair stood there for 9 months and I was going with chalk, carefully and with tape. Maybe I should, you know. And then at some point I was so fed up with myself that I just went in with a knife and a saw and we started cutting it. And also the braces on the back, these are the braces on the back, aluminum braces. And something interesting happened here because we cut them in 3 different parts to make them smaller, let's say, to reduce the new dimensions, they say new dimensions, to the classic design. And we were left with 3 loose pieces. And at that point, it occurred to me that yes, you can shrink, but in order to make it into a unity again, you actually have to add material. So it was a very interesting question that the chair asked of me. By the process, it's just a kind of, you know, you can say, it's a kind of a smart, kind of funky project. But actually, it was a conversation with this chair because you cut into it and the chair says, okay, you cut into me, now what? What are we going to do next? Because you have all these pieces. So then we had to add material. So the question then becomes, if we're going to take a step back in society, what is the material that we need to add so that we keep everything together, so that we can continue to function as a society? We cannot just make that step back. We need something. And we need to think about that something. And maybe that something is also a responsibility of the creative class. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arne. Thank you, Ernesto. So now for the second part of this roundtable, the idea is to propose you 4 images. So I give you a few questions, and then it's just like starters to start the conversation in between you two. So here's the first image to comment on. It's not a knife that I transform. During subtractive experiment, I found it with a few others that had been worn down in the same ways by repeated sharpening of the blade. Also, the original shape of the object has disappeared. It has continued to be used and cared for. So how can we look a different way at material limits or vulnerabilities, which are sometimes no more than interpretation of the image reflected by an object because we expect a complete or a full image of it.
And what was the question?
The question is, how can we look a different way at material limits or vulnerabilities?
So,
or you can comment freely the image, as we said, like whatever you...
So actually I have one of these knives. You gave it as a present, and it is in my studio, and I see it almost every day. And I feel an obligation, because it was a present, to actually engage with it, and that is a present in itself, because I engage with it quite often. But my first remark here would be that the place where your grandmother so lovingly over the years has sharpened or actually cut the bread and somehow it degraded is the place where there's nothing right there. The place where there's nothing, this is where I feel invited somehow. This is the place where the object becomes very generous. This is the place where the object tells the story. So it's not what is left, it is actually what is not there anymore that invites my imagination to think about what happened in all those years and the level of dedication and the level of care and maybe also the level of material, basically also, taking care of things because it's valuable to you. So for me, that absence of material is the invitation to engage with the object. And that is a very, that makes it beautiful for me somehow, because of course a lot of things happened in that empty space there. I'm looking at an image here. Maybe it's a bit weird that I'm pointing to something that you cannot see, but yeah. So this is, that's my space. I like it.
I was able to touch this, maybe this one or another one. I don't remember which one. You showed me one physical, and it's really fragile. I remember the blade is really thin, and it's flexible, no?
Yes.
Then when you talk about care, I felt that when I touched it, like, because you can cut maybe something, but with being carefully,
Yes.
It's a little bit fragile object. And for the other side, I have every time this. The curvature of the border is talking about an emptiness. That is something that is not there anymore. It's the metal that was dissolved in the process of the sharpening. I don't know, the material, no. But it's talking about the habits, about practice, permanent, continuous decision that your grandmother or other people was using the things. Then for me, every object that we use in our house is talking about the way they use them, in some way. And this one is talking about that, specifically about this, I don't know how much time. Did you imagine the 40 years doing the same process?
Even more, I think, yeah.
Maybe more, no?
Maybe 100 years.
We don't have today, it's difficult for somebody today to keep the same object maybe 10 years. We are discarding all the time things. This one was kept for maybe more than 40 years. And you create some kind of empathy with the object. And now thinking about Ezio Mancini, la invención del material, this book, Invención del Material, the first sequence of the book, he's talking about somebody taking a ball, rubber ball, on the wall, and every time the wall is coming back to you. And in 5 minutes, you establish a connection between the material, the wall, and the distance that you have with the things, I think these artifacts represent these things in some way. You recognize the limits of this possibility to use it. Yeah.
I think maybe I'm just thinking out loud, but for me that empty space, or what you said is empty, for me it's not empty somehow. That's the thing. The thing is that it's almost the other way around. It's almost like this knife is the negative of everything that happened, right? It's like a photograph or something. Like you can still use it, but that's not the point anymore for me of this object. It's more like, I don't know. It's like with the dinosaur to the bird or something, or maybe with the harachibu. Okay, so you leave an empty space, but everything becomes possible because of the empty space. So everything this object is, it is for me anyway, because of the empty space that is left behind by it. And that is, I think, a completely different way of designing in itself. Is when you think about the object as something that actually produces another type of story or another type of value apart from its own functionality. So maybe this is the bird, right? Or, I don't know. Yeah, thinking out loud. That's
good. That's what we need to get your ideas, like to get you to share your ideas and comment these few images. From the public? You want, maybe afterward? Is there any comment from the public for the night? So we go to the next one. So this is the image of a crossroads in Pompeii. You can see the complementarity of the two means of transport, pedestrian and vehicles, through the fullness and emptiness of the shapes. So in your opinion, what's at stake? Well, you probably already start to answer this question, but what's at stake between the full and the empty? Not just in this image, but more generally. And how can these two aspects be played together?
No, for me the image, the photo is still because I can imagine this place will be full of water, and I imagine this stone allowed to the people to, it's a kind of bridge, no, with 3 steps. It's a bridge, no?
Yeah,
in some way.
Yeah, it
or
was
just to limit the traffic.
No,
cars?
it was to do not get your foot dirty when you were crossing the road.
Yeah.
So of course we can imagine that there were, of course, maybe some water and dirt on the ground, and also like the opening into between the stones, like let the chariot, I don't know how to say chariot, go in between. So it's a play in between these two shapes that allowed these two possibilities of moving into the city.
It's a little bit, this is a kind of urban knife, the same knife that you showed before. This is an object informed by the use of the people, the experience of the things. You know, it's the same kind of optimization of the materials to produce some kind of possibility for the users of the place. For me, it's a big knife in some way, you know, kind of parallel between both objects. At the same time, they have this limiting the traffic, the big traffic of the cars today. Could be, you know, you recognize that everywhere in the world, how to control the traffic in the city. And yes, it's this synthesis of use, experience, but long use time, you know, long time use for a community. And you are forming this knife that your grandmother did, you know. It's a kind of, yeah.
It's actually the first time I really take a good look at it. I know you said it, but I was like, it's quite a... I think for me the first response would be scale. There are different scales that make different movements possible. It's quite interesting. Like, for instance, these little rocks that are also put over the river. You see them a lot in Asian towns as well, right? Where they make kind of a romantic pathway across rivers, but very designed, let's say. But I see big things moving like this and smaller things moving like that, but nothing really obstructing each other. And that is a kind of an interesting thing. And it's almost like photons, light, sort of traveling through matter. So, you know, I'm going in this direction, but the rays of the sun travel through me in the other direction, and I'm not obstructing them to some extent. And that, to me, is about scale. It's like there are so many levels of reality taking place with any object, basically, that it's interesting when you start thinking about scale also. So you're designing this lamp or something, you're designing it for people. But are you also thinking about other forms of life or other possibilities of scale that you could be designing at the same time for? And I think, I'm sure that there's not a right or wrong answer, but this is an interesting sort of crossroads of scales to me. And then you have the funny little staircase in the back that kind of suggests also something, and even a sort of a sidewalk or something, right? So there's a lot of different scales, like big, small, medium-sized things traveling all through each other somehow, which is, yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you. So the third image is taken from the film Meublé, directed by Jean-Baptiste Barluzel during Maison&Objet. And during the project, the list moves a whole tad of habit, gestures, the way food was prepared and eaten, etc. And as I said, the fragility of a fork has taught me delicacy during the project. So both in your work, you place a great emphasis on experience. And how does the experience of less or other situation can bring about changes? So this is the question, and also you're free to just like react to the image and what you see.
Just, I remember I know you. I knew you work in this moment when I visit you in the studio in Saint-Étienne, and I think I saw the objects before, maybe in the kitchen when I think about Victoria too. Some student of the city we visit you, and I recognize the fork, the spoon, the knife, the plates, the reduction, and when we try to eat, to take a lunch together, this experience, lunching together with these elements, changed totally my mind in connection with this collection. I told you that many times because for me was really relevant how the way that we use the fork today, the spoon, the knife, the plates, the volume, the space, is informing the way that we eat. I remember this experience lunching with them, totally different of the experience that I have in my life, and I had a lot. This was totally different, and believe me, for me was shocking, because I need to do things that I never did before. With maybe this fork have only two, but sometimes you have only one spike, no?
Yeah.
And the spoon was reduced, and the plate, and there is some kind of choreography that you need to learn in the moment. To use that, to take in your hand, or to put in the plate on the table, to have the distance between the plate and your mouth, your face, was totally. Then how you can extrapolate? For me, the question was all the time that how you can extrapolate this experience that is something that I felt in my own body in this moment to others. Because when you are doing an exhibition, you are showing the artifacts. When you are doing the video, you can show how people is eating using these elements. But the experience needs to be personal. What happened really is something that I felt in my body. And for me, this is not lacking. I don't say this is lacking, but it's something that it's a potentiality that you have still there to explore in other ways, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you said we should organize a big lunch or dinner with this type of object.
When I started researching if I could become smaller, and actually 50 centimeters, so that it became a bit of a radical sort of endpoint. Although the smallest person that ever lived is only 54.6 centimeters, so it's not that much bigger than the fantasy that I started off with 15 years ago. But anyway, when I started off, I had come from curating exhibitions. I'm an art historian. I didn't have any formal training as being an artist, so I started with the things that I knew. And food was one of the things that we all know and that I immediately went to. And so I started traveling around with a very small spoon, like a tiny, like almost puppet spoon. And just once in a while when I would have lunch or something with friends, I would actually, it's a bit quirky actually, I know, but then I would eat with this spoon. And because of the size, because the spoon became like a lens to look at this food. And rather than scarcity, actually it became an experience of abundance. And somehow it worked for me, and I wanted to share that experience of abundance with others. So I started to work with giant vegetable grower people, and we, for instance, we put like these giant pumpkins, right, that people like to grow. So I had some events where I invited a pumpkin to the table, like a giant one, and we would be hugging the pumpkin. And the thing was that we became small in compared to the pumpkin. So you feel yourself shrinking. So it became like a shrink experience to some extent. And it's very simple, but because there is no culture for this type of smallness, it was effective for me, because they were just little things that felt fun, but also interesting and challenging. And they felt like they were kind of opening a little bit the gate towards another type of experience. So when I think about scarcity, I always think also about the other side of it. It's like, okay, when something becomes less, then there's always something in relation to that might become more. And how can we shrink towards abundance rather than grow towards scarcity as we are doing at the moment, right? So scarcity is something that I experience a lot in our society. So I'm a constant sort of, I feel scarcity all the time, and it's also one of these economic rules that you create scarcity. It's keep us a sort of going. But actually, what I'm looking for is, as an answer, is to create a sense of abundance. And in a way, you are doing it by reducing your cutlery. You are actually making the food somehow more prominent and more present and more experienceable somehow. So it's interesting that an interface has such an impact, because for me that little spoon in the beginning 15 years ago, it worked for me, and it gave me a little bit of confidence to continue my investigation and to continue talking about it and to continue the work. Not because I knew a lot, but because the spoon, it was like a magic spoon, and you have a little magic fork here, and let's believe in these things, because if we don't believe in these things, then other people believe in other things for us, and that's happening all the time, right? I mean, all our fantasies are sort of being filled in by more, the idea of more, a golden, bigger fork. But let's believe in these very modest things, because they actually have a lot of stories to tell us. And I think even in this image, which is just a simple image, there's already a lot of stories going on there. Yeah.
Because often we need to take yogurt. Someplace everybody here maybe have the experience to take a cardboard and just eat. But what happened here, you have an ecosystem of less, you know. It's not only that you are going to a place and you need to take a yogurt and you use a cardboard piece or coming from you or paper and you just took the yogurt. In this case, every artifact was affected by the same possibility. And for me, it was new. I ate many things with many things in my life. You know, you can take water like that. Everybody's doing that. But in this case, was something informing the way that we eat, but at the same time informing the food, the way that you cut the pieces. There is many things, many process of transformation around it's more about ecosystem of elements than a situation. The situation can happen to us, but this one was more, for me, was more scenographic, choreographic. My body needs to adapt to this situation. It's not like you go to the airport and you just do that in the corner of the room with taking a yogurt really fast. Yeah, just to add that.
One more thought maybe is so I'm interested in surrealism, not necessarily in the Dali surrealism or something, but more like the Breton, like the fundamental surrealism that was a response to the First World War, this deep mistrust of the creative self, let's say. And that's why they started to disrupt themselves, right? They start to come up with all these automata and kind of things. Is that I think these are also in a way surreal tools, in that they disrupt reality in the way that it exists. And so the surrealists, they didn't trust even themselves, right? So that's why they started drinking and drugs, because they somehow felt like they were the product of the same product, also a product of the same time, let's say, that created the war and all this devastation. So they mistrusted themselves, and so they created all these kind of tools. And I think here we have surreal tools that also mistrust reality to some extent, and that want to create a different perspective because it's necessary. We need to create different tools because society is very powerful in telling a certain message about who we are as a consumer or as a citizen. And we need to disrupt, even with a fork, we need to disrupt that stranglehold, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, about the body, like just to give a little point on the movie, we can see that at the beginning of the experience, I'm much more violent with the object than at the end of the experience, because everything gets fragile, and so the way I move, the way I use the object, it's really easy to perceive when we look at the movie. I was not at all aware of this. But then when we finished the movie, I was really surprised to see this happening in my body. And also the fact that we can learn really quickly to change the habit with the body. To boil the water, I just had the lower part of the original boiler. And I just, with a I can't say, a pince. I just open a little the metal to have a better way to pour the water into the cup. And the 2, 3, 4 first time I used this part of the boiler, I was thinking, no, that's not working. It's not working. This is dangerous. You're not able to use it. And one day, I use it and I pour perfectly into the cup. And I thought that my assistant had changed the object while I was not there. I thought she modified the object, and that was making me able to pour into the cup. But it's just that in 4 times, the body learned how to use the object. So it happened really, really quickly. And to that last image. So this image is taken from the animated series La Linea, that was realized in the 70s by Osvaldo Cavandoli. So to me, he's a kind of a master of subtractive graphic design. And he used a single line to create the character Mr. Linea and the unstable material world that surrounds him. And in each episode, Mr. Linea protests about the voids and the inadequacies of his world and asks the illustrator, who takes on the role of architect, designer, or great creator, to modify the line to extend his environment. So, in your opinion, what are the barriers that limit our ability to choose or to accept the idea of less?
That's a big question. For a small answer, maybe. There are no barriers, I think. That's the thing. There are no physical barriers. There are no... I mean, maybe... I don't know. I don't know if I can answer this question. But I don't feel that there are barriers. I feel that if you can say that there's a barrier in a more metaphorical way, maybe it is just a matter of our mind, let's say. We in terms of lines, of course, this linear thinking, that we always have to go somewhere, that this is not enough, that we're not going to return to this point, is one of those mental barriers. Like we always, you know, I don't know, at some point somebody came up with the idea of a line. Who was it? One of these Greeks, right? It didn't even exist. The line did not even exist as a mathematical concept. It wasn't, you know, it was all about cycles and about you know, being in contact with living things that disappeared and then came back again, or that sort of went into the earth and came back again. So there were only circles, and then at some point you got this straight line that was going into infinity and that was never going to meet again that other part of the line. And so I think that's one of the barriers, is that we are never satisfied in this point. We always have to jump over some sort of imagined hole in the ground to get to the other side, and then maybe we'll be where we want to be. But we, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I approach to the less in another way, to the way that you approach, both of you in some way, you know, because my history in Cuba. I will just mention something practical in our case. Less is automatically connected with poverty in the mind of Cuban people, for example. I will talk about Cubans, this is my experience, no? Or repair. People in Cuba are thinking that we repair, or you need to repair an artifact, or you have an object repaired by you in the house, you will hide that. You need to hide that because it's an expression that you are living in poverty. And people is avoiding to have to project this kind of image out. And for me it's a conflict in Cuba, because this stigma that is created by society, is created by the people living in poverty too, is a stigma created by everybody together. It's really killing the possibility of people in Cuba that they are repairing for 40 years. Now they are trying to hide what they are doing, and they are ashamed about repair, for example. And it's a practice that is totally necessary today, to consider the possibility to open the artifacts, to open the object, to go inside, to repair, to transform, to appropriate the technology, to learn together. Then in the context of Cuba, in the context of Latin America, to even in USA, in Miami, for example, Cuba, I say many times that when you arrive to a neighborhood in Miami, when Cubans are living together, you can find one house, and out in the parking lot, there is 3 cars, family cars. And inside the house, there are living 3 persons, and every person has a family car. It's crazy, because they want to have a big car. They don't want to look anymore as people living in poverty. Then I think the barrier is about that, is about our own experience in that, in connection with the less, and still my practice, the theater of puppet that I'm doing is about that, about to talk with Cuba about repair in another way. How we can talk today with them, how can I talk with them in other way, without lose the possibility of the experience that they have already repairing, and bring that to the design conversation today, you know. But yes, I was pushing this conversation by force. You know, I want to be, I say many times, I want to be a designer, designing things, and one day I can't anymore. Then it was not by decision, it was by force. And of course, this conversation put us together, you know, because I have this approach, you have another one, and we are talking about the same thing. It's interesting that we are addressing the same subject in different contexts, in different culture. It's important, I think. Yeah.
Did you mention, I don't know, I wasn't paying, maybe, did you mention that I came across the work of Ernesto when we wrote a repair manifesto 20 years ago. I was working as a curator in Amsterdam, and we wanted to do something about repair in 2007, I think, something like this. And then we were, from the Western perspective, basically, repair for us was a way to tackle this overconsumption and this sort of waste. And then I came across a writing by Ernesto, which took it from a completely different angle, which was much more about activism, about loving something, about a completely different approach. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that we come to the same thing that we both love, but from a very different perspective. And I think coming to the same point, that is a very interesting act. If you come from such different backgrounds and such different reasons why. But you still come to the act of repair. You still come to the act that you love, actually, when something is broken and you see that somebody tended to it, and that you can see the beauty in this act. And that was a big lesson for me somehow, that you taught me. That we have to take multi-perspective approaches to every design object, to every design process, and to learn from each other. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm happy we had this time together. I think it brings to me more questions, but it's really interesting it really helps to develop a project and to understand how we can talk, and in what part of our own approach we can have like connection, and how can we interact around these questions. So thank you very much. We may have time for, we have about like maybe 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Okay.
I would be very interested. There's quite a lot of young people here, maybe some still going to schools, designers. I'm quite interested if, let's say, this idea of less, a culture of less, or less or scarcity as a source of inspiration, if that is in any way sort of part of the curriculum now at schools, if this is a way of approaching things, or if it's still about, okay, we have material here, it's unlimited, and we're going to make something beautiful, or how have things changed, let's say, in the last years? I don't know. Is there somebody who can?
Is there a student, maybe, who wants to answer, or teachers in art school?
I'm not connecting.
No.
Please. Yeah, here, there's one. You see?
During my bachelor in product design, industrial design, we talk about dithyrambs and the concept of less is more. Yeah. And we have a lot of lesson about eco-conception. to reduce some everything, and to do something very useful, and not put more thing, but just do the less of the object. And I think for industrial design, more professor make the focus of the less is more now than in different.
I think it's interesting how less is more, right? You can only sell the idea of less if it ends up being more to some extent. That's how deeply ingrained this obsession with growth is in our culture somehow. It's very nice design, and I understand why they're talking about less. But why does it have to be more? See, and it's in your school. It's so deeply ingrained. When can we be inspired by less, rather than less is more, or whatever, green growth, or what all these kind of things? Just less. This is the question. Can we create a culture of less, rather than less is more? This is really a challenge. And can we be inspired by the idea? Or do we always have to be promised more at the end if we do less? This is really something that I question. And I want to know the answer, basically. Can we find a way?
I was thinking about the example that you show. In some way was informed by culture. In some way, you have the Pompeii street. The Pompeii street was made by the everyday use of the community. The knife was sharp or reduced by the community of your family. The object that you are producing is in the other way. You are creating a culture. You are provoking to a new culture is coming out. This is the difference for me, and it's interesting because you are creating conditions to talk about that today. We are here today because you are doing that. But in this case, this was made by the use of the community. It's two different approaches. In the case, just to answer to but to comment about that, in the Dieter Rams and the Google, there was a designer too in this period in the school of Ulm. They was approaching to the object in an interesting way. They was creating artifacts that people can repair. The object produced by Dieter Rams or Google have a manual inside. You open in the screen in the back of the radio, and you can repair it yourself if you want. Because it was a post-war school, and they tried to teach people how to repair, how to change the pieces from the radios made by the Dieter Rams, so these people. In the same school, and this is a provocation that because I was visiting this school some years ago and working in the archive, and I found that in the period of the Maldonado and Gibbon-Siep in the same school, they asked to the student to design a way to put two pieces of plastic together in the easy way to facilitate the work of the workers in the line of production. Then when you are doing a radio, a kind of artifacts like that, it would be easy for the workers to do click, and that's it. Click, that's it. Click, and that's it. Before, you have the radio and you have the screw. You need to remove the screw. You need to remove the back of the object to access, da-da-da. When they decide that to facilitate the work of the workers, they facilitate the object that is closed forever. You don't know how to open again. Then there is no way to repair anymore. And you need to put in the trash and to buy a new one. Then they try to do the good thing. They try to facilitate the way. The thing happens sometimes this way. They try to reduce the step in production, but they open a new way to the object close that we are dealing today. We can establish a parallel between the design of Dieter Rams, for example, and Apple. Or people establish many connections between the form. Then the more difficult object you can access today is an Apple computer or something else. Now it's better, but before it was really totally hermetic. It was difficult to go inside. I came out of the conversation, but sorry, but
That's fine.
just answered that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's nice, right? So, it was more the tone of your voice. It's like, click. That was the tone of your voice, click. Or you have to put the screws. So even the tone of your voice was already sort of going with the story. Yeah. You have been convinced But I wonder if the workers were really dissatisfied with screws, right? Maybe. I mean, I love screws. When I see an object with screws, I'm happy. I don't like clickable things. So the question is this a true story, or is this what we tell each other? Because, yeah, it's real to some extent, but it's also not real, because I can also say that, yeah, but this was about time saving, you know, it was about quicker production. There are other reasons why clicking for a producer is so it's true, but it's one perspective. And so I think if we continue to tell the story from this perspective, then things will keep moving in that direction, right? But if you start to talk from another perspective, maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe the culture of the screw will survive. You know, it's kind of how can we do other storytelling? Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, when you talk about the fact that I was working the other way, that was interesting also during the project, that the limit, the rule I put, like to remove 2/3 of each object, leads me to have like 112 different response to this 2/3 less. Like each object had a different way to respond to this material limit. So it's yeah, there is many different things happening. So I get many different answers from the different objects. So some can be aesthetic or practical. So there were all these possibilities. So it's hard for me to summarize maybe this kind of experience, because there is so many different things to be developed or question, and it's question and question and question again.
What happened to the 1/3 that was left that you removed?
I was living in the flat with, so the 2/3 was going out of the flat. So 2/3. The 2/3 I kept it as a material to study also the object and this experiment. So even now, the 2/3 that have been removed, they are shown in the exhibition in Fondation Martell. Instead of choosing to show the object, we've chosen to show the leftovers from the experiment. So what we collect there, it's still like something I can re-question a different way. So the way I'm thinking this kind of the project is always like evolving and changing, and this conversation will bring new question, and I think that's the way I like to work. So it's never, the project never stop in a way.
Okay, thank you. I have two things. I have a joke and a question. I will start by the joke and I will do the question. Arne, I'm a typical Breton guy. I'm 1 meter 73 centimeters. So if you want to go forward into your project and give me a few centimeters, I take it with pleasure.
And it's my deepest wish.
And my question is very simple, but I feel that three of you have a very different context of production. Mathilde, you was in a kind of a lab condition by designing by yourself the experience. Arne, for me, it's more you have a more speculative and storytelling approach. And Ernesto, it's very empirical because you used to live into scarcity condition, so you didn't choose it. So my question is more about you told about what was the common thing in your approach, but mainly my question is what are your differences about these three different contexts? Maybe it's too long for a last question, but it's to get. Thank you.
Less microphone. Sorry. I say that, yeah, maybe there is a lot of difference. You can perceive that in our conversation, but mainly I think for me it's interesting to see how much common interest we have in something. We have hope. Really, even being a pessimist and full of hope, because I think this my practice is try to do that, to try to talk with others, to try to. I don't want people living in a scarcity. You know, I say all the time, poverty is never a way, never. For me, the way is people deciding by themselves what they need. This is what I learned in Cuba. I learned that it's possible to decide what you need, and just to answer this need by yourself. I did that with my family, together, sometimes individual, sometimes in collective. But the poverty is never a way. There is another kind of poverty that you mentioned sometimes, and it's interesting for me. In Cuba, we have a tradition of a kind of monastery poverty, and the Cuban Revolution, the first one against Spain, have this is root in this kind of austerity. Austerity is the word, no? Austerity. I don't need. I need to use only this all my life, and that's it. You have this in the Cuban soldiers, in the Cuban heroes of the battle against Spain. We have this kind of character, and this inform our poetry, our music, our many things. The life of the black people in Cuba, the black community in Cuba, the way that they produce the music, the way that they produce instrument. All this force is there, and poverty there inside is no poverty, scarcity or poverty. We say poverty. We call that la pobreza irradiante. We have a word for that. It's la pobreza irradiante in Spanish. I don't know, it's in French, in English even. It's a radiant poverty. It's a kind of... But I think that we have more things in common about this hope than different. Yeah, maybe I prefer they mention the difference.
I think hope is also kind of a choice. I mean, what I can say, and I don't know how that is for you, but I see myself as the problem in my research. So I'm battling my own inability to take these steps. And every time I run into, the not wanting to go there, and I'm trying to investigate it and research it. And because I am part of a civilization that is creating... I mean, the Dutch, we sort of invented a lot of the things that are wreaking havoc on the planet, right? With the VOC and the 17th century colonialism, all these kind of things. So I see myself as a product from that culture. That's why I was talking about surrealism at the beginning. Through my work, I try to disrupt what I represent in size, in culture, in how I speak about things, in everything. And I don't know how that is if you are from a situation where actually maybe you don't represent the system that you are part of. Actually, you want to change that system in a different, maybe in a way, but I represent my system in a way, right? I am it, I live it, I'm in the flesh. And maybe there's a difference there, but I do agree that we find each other somewhere in the middle where the perspectives are very different, but we have a sort of a sensitivity or a hope that we as a species can find a way to get out of the situation, so on, these situations, this culture.
I don't know if I choose to keep on with Ernesto approach and art, like to see more the similarities, but I will. So I will go back to a similarity. We are each of us, I think, like not okay with the fact that things need to be as we think they should be. Like always, like trying to make a step back or a sidestep, and to experiment. For me, in the practice, I always say like it's kind of workshop I give to myself, in the way that even if you can try to look at a situation and think like, if I do this, this will happen. If you don't do it, you will never know really what's happening. So I think this is how I perceive the experiment I do. So because we can think like everything can be like design or develop. We can know already what's going to happen, in what way, and I don't believe this, and that's why to go into that practice without, and also one of the things is I do it to myself because I can't do it. I can't say to someone like this is what you need to experiment. This is a limit I always put in my work. It's not being polite or I don't know. It's just like I want to try myself as a designer, as a researcher, as a human being, like what's happening with this and how this affects my own perception. So that's also what Arne were saying with your approach. I think we need to stop. It would have been nice to keep on with the conversation and question, but really thank you Anne-Claire for this nice opportunity to have this talk today. Thank you Arne and Ernesto. I'm really glad we spent this time together, and have a nice afternoon.